let's talk about where you are now and what is your condition. I find it useful to sort of externalize this so that I can be a little bit more objective. So I tend to think about myself, like my body and my, my thoughts as a boat. So one thing to remember about boats, so you can be compassionate with yourself, is every boat leaks. So you need to look for where the leaks are in your boat, but also try to find what are the strengths of this boat. What does it do well? What do you like about it? What objectively is great about it? Then also take a look at the comorbidities that you have. So besides ADHD, you have other issues that define your overall condition. What are those and how do they affect the performance and navigational potential of your vessel? Next is your social group. Evaluate your social group. Are the people that you surround yourself with most often helping to lift you up? Can you be honest with them? Will they be honest with you? Do you trust them? This is the crew on your ship. These are the people who are actually going to help you sail towards your destination. They're going to be with you the whole time. So you need to surround yourself with the right people. It's very important. Finding them is difficult. Listening to them can be more difficult, but it's got to be done. And finally, direction. And this might be the most important of all. You need to have a clear destination in mind, an ultimate goal, because no matter whether you are navigating with intention or not, no matter where you think you're headed, or if you're not thinking about it, you will end up somewhere. You are headed somewhere. If your boat is sitting on the water, the waves are constantly pushing it, whether you are sailing in a certain direction or not. So you need to get all of those things sort of understood about yourself so that you can know where you are so that it's possible to chart a course to where you want to go. Self-talk. So all of your speed towards your destination is going to be hindered or aided by your attitude. And that is really defined by how you talk to yourself about you and your condition. So I think it's important to remove certain words from our vocabulary or modify them so they're more compassionate. So for instance, I used to tell myself and even joke with other people when I wouldn't get a task done, it would always come up that I'm lazy. Okay. That was tremendously hurtful to internalize that and believe it. And if you can do anything to avoid it, I highly recommend it because you're not lazy. Okay. There's a couple things going on. The big one is you're probably insecure, okay? You probably don't want to feel vulnerable, don't want to put yourself out there. Maybe the task is not even interesting to you and you just feel obligated to do it. But it's not laziness. Laziness is just the negative side of a two-sided coin here. It's really insecurity, and you can undermine your insecurity, overcome your insecurity by simply becoming curious and about your desires. Figure out, how can I do this? How can I do it better? What's a different way? What is it? How can I make this unique? What are my questions about this thing? And suddenly you're not going to be lazy anymore because you're going to be curious and excited about where your thoughts are headed. The next one on the list is should. You got to remove should from your life and switch it for want, because you're not going to do anything that you are told that you should do, that you feel obligated to do. That's really what should means. It's not that you should do something. It means external society made you feel obligated to do something that you do not want to do, that you wouldn't naturally do. And the more shoulds you have in your life, the more opportunities you're going to have to fail at something that you aren't able to engage with. The next one is stupid. You're not stupid. You're unfamiliar with something. Just take that right out of your vocabulary. People with ADHD aren't stupid. We just are unfamiliar with things. It takes a while to learn how to do things. That's just a natural part of trying something new or getting good at something. So you're unfamiliar. The next one is panic. I used to think that panic was a virtue. I used to think that if I was panicked and I sort of communicated that to people with my body language, then that would show them that I cared about what I was doing. But that is not what it's communicating. That's communicating that I'm disorganized, I'm unprepared, I'm rushing, I'm careless, and I'm very stressed out. And stress makes everything harder. It makes everything worse. Panic is never useful. Urgency, on the other hand, is useful. Urgency does communicate that you care about something, and it's necessary to move things forward in a timely fashion, to set deadlines and to hit those deadlines. That's urgency. So if you can internalize a sense of urgency without panic, that's what's going to be helpful for you to move forward as quickly as possible. Next is failure, related to stupidity. You're not a failure. You haven't failed. You're simply not there yet. So just keep trying. Those who don't give up will succeed. The next one is drugs. And this one comes up all the time around particularly stimulant medication like Adderall and Ritalin and a lot of the medicine that atypicals are prescribed. We would not use a derisive, derogatory sort of slanted term like drugs to describe inhalers for people with asthma or crutches or glasses or any other kind of like medicine or prostheses or aid that people use when they simply have a condition that they're trying to navigate with. So your medicine is prescribed by a doctor. It works for you in a different way than it works for neurotypicals. Your brain chemistry and your brain structure is different. To you, this is medicine. It comes from a doctor. This is not a party habit. So don't talk about it like it's drugs, and don't tolerate anybody who's going to kind of throw that shade your way. And the last one is disorder. I know disorder is the last D in ADHD, so maybe it's kind of, it seems like, why would you have a problem with that? But I feel like disorder is sort of a negative way to think about what's going on with me. I'm not disordered. I'm not broken. I don't need to be fixed. I have a condition. And my condition is something that sometimes causes me to be a little bit disorderly in my organizational habits, for instance. But I'm not broken as such, and so I prefer the term condition. I think it's a little bit more compassionate. So now that we have positive self-talk going on, and we're thinking about how to treat ourselves with more compassion and in a more uplifting way, you might at this point, if you haven't already, be ready to go in for a diagnosis and talk to a real medical professional about what you're going through. Before you do this, I think it's really important to talk to maybe one or two people who are closest to you, who you can get good, honest feedback from. Honestly, the feedback isn't even the important part. It's just that they'll listen to what you're going through. They're not there for advice or really feedback even. They're just there to listen to what you're going through, to support you and to make you feel good about yourself no matter what you're feeling. Because this is going to be a hard, a big change for you. There's a lot going on when you go in for an ADHD diagnosis. But again, it's got to be people who are very close to you. I wouldn't tell my boss. I wouldn't tell my children. I wouldn't tell my parents. I wouldn't tell my friends. I would tell my best friend and my wife. That's it. Those are the only people that I would consider telling. But it is important to have somebody there to talk about your feelings going into it, and also to help you do the difficult work in some capacity of finding the right medical professional and setting the appointment and keeping the appointment. And when you do that, when you do find the medical professional who you'll go to for your diagnosis, it's important that you find somebody who has ADHD experience. Even though this diagnosis is becoming much more common and better understood, there's still a lot of ignorance and prejudice and misconceptions, even in the medical community, about ADHD. So find somebody with experience and feel free to get a second opinion. A medical professional is going to be able to illuminate so much about what you're going through from a clinical perspective, from the actual medical science behind it. And they're also going to be able to diagnose some potential comorbidities that you might have. So for instance, things like depression and bipolar disorder can cause symptoms that are similar to ADHD. And you might also have those disorders or other disorders, and they all need to be treated separately. They all have their own treatment modalities, and your medical professional can help you sort of tease that apart and figure out what's the best course of action for each one of those. After your diagnosis is done, that's when you're really going to want somebody there to talk to, because you're going to be going through a lot of feelings, both positive and negative. You're probably going to have a lot going on inside of you emotionally. You'll probably go through a progression of many different emotions. Here's just a short list of some things you might be feeling. I definitely grieved. I was angry for what could have been if I would have known about my ADHD sooner in life. But luckily, I really latched onto the positive emotions, which was an overwhelming sense of relief and clarity about my condition and what I was actually going through. So much of my behavior now made a lot more sense to me. So it's important to have somebody who will just listen to you and be supportive as you go through those things. You're allowed to feel however you want to feel, and whatever it is, just know that it will pass, and that this is the moment, the perfect opportunity to start using that emotional energy to consider what kind of changes you want to make going forward.